I would like to get started, so if you want to settle down, get some food, get some wine,
I like this guy.
okay, and then let's give Ben an opportunity to tell us what this is all about. Okay? All right. Well, first of all, good evening, and I apologize. I heard several complaints that this place was hard to find. This is the first time we are hosting an event here, so I think it will be better next time. You know, we will know exactly how to direct you, so you don't have to wander around. My name is G.B. Bose, and I'm hosting Ben this evening. I'm the president and CEO of a financial planning firm here in Washington, D.C. And I've known Ben for a while. I also helped Ben out a little bit with financing. But the main reason we wanted to host this event is because when Ben told me about what he was working on and what this book was all about, it touched a chord. And, you know, I have some cue cards, and I'm going to use some of them because I think this is very relevant. We, as Americans, we tend to make snap judgments, all right, without really spending enough time on saying issues. And this is one issue that I think is important for us to recognize. We have had some bad experience as a nation with foreign policy and dealing with countries around the world. One of the things that and I was given is that because we know little about the way people live and think in distant and poor countries, America has stumbled into third world conflicts in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. And this book that Ben has produced is an attempt to bridge the gap of understanding and provide what intelligence officers call ground truth, the feeling of real life in countries. That's really what it's all about. And I don't need to tell you about Ben's accomplishments. You're all friends of Ben. Ben is an extremely accomplished individual, very well respected. And one of the things that stuck with me when Ben and I first talked about this was, as a reporter, his editors always told him to send in all the sad, depressing, and bad stories that he could find around the globe. And so Ben asked, what about the good stories? And the editor said, good stories don't sell news. So we really don't care about the good stories. So what Ben did on the side is collect all these wonderful experiences that he has had over the last 40 years, traveling all corners of the globe and interacting with all kinds of different cultures. And in the process, he has actually discovered some very profound truths that he's going to share with us this evening. And one of the profound truths that he's discovered is that we really are all the same. We all want the same things, we all have the same emotions, and we all are really wanting to get the same things. So I'm not going to elaborate on that, but suffice to say that Ben kept a log of all these good things that happened to him over the last 40 years. And Ben is also an avid photographer. He's a very good photographer. And you see an instance of what he can do on the screen here. I thought that was a very, very poignant photograph that he took in Afghanistan, with the permission of this person, of course. Okay, and without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Ben Barber and tell his story in his own way. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ben Barber, my friend Ben Barber.
Thank you, GB. Let me first explain how GB came to be my friend and to support this. A few years ago, when USAID decided to give me the political boot in the behind, because the administration had changed, and nobody told them that I wasn't hired because of my political leanings, but because I was an editor and a writer and knew the world. So I went to a seminar that GB was invited to put on at USAID in the building. And it was all about how to protect whatever money you put aside. And it just made perfect sense. It just seemed absolutely logical. And I went and met with him and became a client. And it's been, you know, I mean, obviously the stock exchange is up and down. Nobody can escape that. But at least he's been very helpful. And he's agreed to sponsor this. And he, just by way of background, he has 2 master's degrees, and he taught at Wharton School at the MBA level, so he's an eminently qualified individual. This book, I think GB kind of explained, well, how did I first get into this? I had just finished college, and I went to Paris to study French. And while I was there, I met people who were coming back from Morocco. And it seemed pretty exciting. I bought a motorcycle and I drove down to Morocco and spent about 2 or 3 months riding around Morocco. And it was a marvelous time. It was like 1964, 65. And people were extremely friendly to me. And I was wondering, why are they so friendly to an American? And it turned out that they still remembered the American farm boys that came ashore in '43 with Eisenhower and talked to them for the first time like they were human beings, as opposed to the French and the Germans who immediately sort of seemed to look down upon me. They felt that they were second-class citizens vis-a-vis the French, the Europeans. But the Americans were more sort of naive, well-meaning, and left a really wonderful impression. So after Morocco, I came back to the United States and saved some money and decided to go on a really long journey. And I went to India. And it took me about 1.5 years to travel all across Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and spent 6 months in India. And this was before I was a reporter. I was writing poetry, and I was just enamored of this part of the world. Then I got home and I decided to become a journalist. I took a master's at BU and went back to these countries as a reporter and found that it ain't so. It's not the way you thought it was. Everything seems so groovy when you're young and you really don't know, you don't have the tools to ask. But then when you start asking, you find out about the caste, and the women have no education, and all the beautiful food and weavings and all this stuff is made because women's labor is worth pennies an hour, sometimes pennies a day. So I was doing all this reporting, and the more I was doing reporting, actually, I was writing now for the London Observer and the Baltimore Sun and Miami Herald. I had a group of about 7 papers I wrote for. But they were pushing me to get more and more into war and famine and disease and all these other problems, whereas I wanted to write about more positive things. So I remember, as a matter of fact, that Jimmy Wolf is here, whom I met, I think, on my first day in Bangkok. I decided to go live in Bangkok. And I met him at the Press Club, Foreign Correspondents Association. And I said, I want to write about economic development. This was 1982, and fantastic things are taking place. The Asian tigers, the dragons, the tigers, whatever. There was tremendous rate of economic growth. And the correspondents there, the other reporters, laughed. And they said, you'll never sell those stories. You know what your editors want? This is Bangkok. They want hookers, they want opium, they want Cambodian refugees, they want elephants, and they want monks. That's how they see Thailand. Those are the Thai stories. So what I did was I made a menu of about 4 stories, including the economic development and agricultural development and all that. And surely every single paper that I talked to, they wanted the same thing. They wanted the prostitutes, and the elephant story, and it was absolutely stereotypical. So, but I did struggle. I have a story about the Iron Buffalo, which was a mechanized plow to work in the flooded fields. And I found the guy who invented it at Kasetsart University, the Institute of Mechanical Engineering. And he turns out he got the idea for this plow by watching horses in the 1920s when he was at prep school in New Hampshire. And the horses had these huge hoofs that enabled them to work in muddy fields. And so he developed these paddle wheels, iron paddle wheels, that would keep the little paddy plow working. And so, you know, yes, you can sell a good story, but you have to work 3 times as hard to get it. You know, I had to go up country with an interpreter to go walk out through the muddy fields to interview a farmer using the machine. I had to go to Kasetsart University. I interviewed Prince Teperet, who invented the machine. And so it's like 4 days of work. Whereas if I'd just taken a bus up to the Thai border and go to the Cambodian refugee camps, in like 4 hours I could get the story and make the same sale. So the rules of economics pushed me more and more towards war. So you'll see that the book includes war. You can't ignore it. But I tried to show you also the face of, you know, in many of these countries, you go even to cover a war, and the minute you get off the plane, you realize that 90% of the people in that country are not suffering. They're not at war, that they're actually doing quite well, and things that are, but the only thing that makes the paper in this country is the war. So we have a warped understanding of the world around us. People are afraid of the world. They think the world is just full of hostile people and terrorists and starvation and disease. But that's not, I mean, that exists, but that's maybe 8% of what we call the third world. So I think, and of course, as GB said, that because of this predilection of the newspapers and TV to cover the most horrible and saddest and most threatening of events, we make decisions that are foolish, and we stumble into Vietnam without knowing. How many of us knew that in the north of Vietnam the people have a culture called the Annamite, which is very austere, it's sort of like the German, Northern European, the Lutheran, you know, guilt-ridden, hard, ascetic mentality. And the South, the people we tried to help, were, oh, it's sunny, it's warm, pie is on the tree, kick back and relax. Well, the Southerners couldn't resist the Northerners, and we just got in the way of a civil war that we didn't understand. And the same, I believe it's been said that Rumsfeld or Wolfowitz, before the invasion of Iraq, I mean after the invasion of Iraq, had no idea that the country was divided between Sunni and Shia. And what a Shia was and what a Sunni was. Well, we know now, don't we? 4,000 Americans are dead and 100,000 Iraqis. So this is just an attempt to, if you read the book, the captions, of course I'm basically a writer, not a photographer, but the captions explain these stories that I worked on. And what it is that each of these pictures will tell us that will help us open our eyes to see better when we go abroad and learn more about these things. So I think I've got a thing here. Okay. These are a couple of mujahideen I captured. No. It's army guys in Afghanistan. Very, very nice people, actually.
The other way.
Okay. Now, who is this guy standing here? This is 1988. This is an a South Vietnamese PSYOPs colonel. All of these guys were PSYOPs. They had just spent 13 years in a re-education camp. Psychological operations. What is that? You don't want to find out. It's the spying, disinformation, planting of things, a lot of not nice stuff. Anyhow, in 1988, Vietnam realized that all the other countries in Southeast Asia were getting rich, except for them. And they decided to learn from Thailand, Singapore, and Malaysia. And they opened up to trade. And they also closed all the re-education camps and sent these guys home. And one of the North Vietnamese guys said, "We have been afraid of these guys. You look in their eyes, these are the smart people. Most of these people had studied in the United States, and it took a long time for them to open up." Oops. This is Pakistan, and this man is breaking rocks with a little hammer to build a road. He's got even, if you can see there, there's little like metal sleeves to protect his fingers. And he'll just sit there all day long breaking stones because that's the level that the economy is on. It's in Kashmir. This is Haiti. Haiti is one of the countries in the world where it's cheaper to hire a human to pull than to hire a donkey. And yeah, Haiti is one of the countries that most disappointed me. I went down there many times, and when Duvalier was thrown out, I believed, and a lot of people believed, that finally they're going to get ahead. And then there was just one coup after another, catastrophe, and it just doesn't seem to be able to escape. This is a guy who's just graduating from the Afghan military academy. The U.S. was training soldiers, and these guys are right now on the front lines as we're pulling back. This young woman in Kabul University was just returning to resume her study of pharmacy. She was in the university when the Taliban came over, took power. She was not allowed to study anymore. So 5 years later, the Americans came in, and the Taliban were out, and she was able to resume her studies. I mean, you just look at a woman like that, and you just think, you know, why should she not be able to be a pharmacist if that's what she wants to be? This is an interesting picture. This is a hospital in Kabul, and this guy in white has been Loma Linda University took over the management of the hospital, and of course they realized the big problem is infections because the streets are filthy, and so people when they come in are forced to take off their shoes and put on slippers. And here's this guy with a sport jacket who's like a wealthy Afghan, and here's this schlub of a guy who's just basically the janitor telling him, you can't wear your shoes into the hospital. And this is not just a question of cleanliness, but it's a measure of society changing, where even the wealthy guy has to listen to the poor guy because that's his role, and that's a society that begins to have rules. This is called the Hindu Kush Mountains, which means Hindu killers. And when you see them, you can see why they're called that. This is just on the flight I took up to Mazar-e Sharif from Kabul. Okay, these girls are in the first grade. How is it possible? You look at them, they're 16 and 17 years old. They're in the first grade because there was no school for girls for all those years under the Taliban. So now the schools are open. You can't put a 17-year-old girl into the class with 5- and 6-year-old kids. So USAID put together what they call the Accelerated Learning Curriculum, where you teach the entire first 6 grades in a matter of months. Because now these kids are more alert, they're actually smarter and more capable, and it was marvelous to see them whipping through their lessons. And I mean, these kids would have been eclipsed, they would have remained illiterate. Okay, this is Kashmir after the earthquake of 2005. Killed 75,000 people. We sent these helicopters, and the helicopters would, you can see that, they would just come over, they wouldn't stop, they wouldn't land, they just come over, they have it hooked down, and they hook up the loads and take off and come back. And this over here is a Russian helicopter that was used by the UN. The Russian helicopter had to park, turn off the engine, load it by hand, and then unload it up in the mountains. So this US Chinook helicopter was able to carry possibly 8 to 10 times as much food over the day as one of these. This is Badakhshan, a province in northern Afghanistan. These guys had finished high school, and now there was a private school that was teaching them English and computers. And this kid had been studying for like 3 months. I said, yeah, let me see you read. Okay, and no insult, I've got a daughter here in the audience somewhere. But my kids, at the end of 3 months studying French or Spanish, could not read French or Spanish. This kid could read it. And not only is it was just remarkable. And it's a different alphabet. So I was just, the power of learning was, I'm going the wrong way, here we go. This is the old-fashioned camera guy in Badakhshan. They open the thing by hand. It's easily 100 years old technology. These young women are only 18 years old. And they came from the villages around Faizabad to learn how to be midwives. The area around Faizabad had the highest female mortality rate in the world. I think it was 200 per thousand. Per thousand? Not that high. It's pretty high. It was the worst. It was the worst place. And the first question I asked them was, what are you going to do if the babies breach? And they got to speak, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, but it's obviously something that they had studied, they were aware of. And then I asked, what happens when you go back to the village and there's an old woman, a midwife, who says, no, I know how to do it best, you stay out of the way, and wants to use these old methods which led to the highest death rate in the world. And they were very clever. They said that, no, I'm going to ask her to help me. I'm going to involve her with me. I'm going to work together with her, which I thought showed a very clever way to introduce technologies. This I love. This is, I call it Slum Dad. You see this guy, if you ran into him in a dark alley, he's got his tattoos and he's kind of a tough-looking guy. You might be afraid of him, but then you see him out here, he's cooking food, he's got this little kid he's protectively holding, and he's got his motorcycle in the back, and the kid has a kid's motorcycle there. And the stove he's using is an efficiency stove. It's got sheet metal around it to control the flow of air, so it uses less, it pollutes less. And it's just signs of, you see, when you look into the picture, you see things. This is a Hmong girl, about 12 years old, in a refugee camp in Thailand. You know, the Hmong suffered because they joined with the United States, the CIA's secret army in Laos. And about 100,000 of them fled to Thailand, and most of them came to the United States. They're centered in Fresno, California, and in St. Paul, Minneapolis area. And this girl told me that she wanted to be a doctor someday. But what they were all scared is they were scared the Thai would send them back into Laos. And I said, do you have your parents here? My father is here. And then I heard an explosion. Not too close, I mean a few miles away. He was working in a quarry, you know, blowing up rocks and stuff. Okay, ever hear of the Khmer Rouge? These are the Khmer Rouge. They were finally kicked out by the Vietnamese in 1979 in Christmas, and they fled to the Cambodian border, to the Thai border, and they're in a refugee camp there. And they're obviously breeding like rabbits. And you know, these are the guys that killed 1 million of their own fellow countrymen. And the United States and China quietly supported them because they were the best fighters when they wanted to punish the Vietnam. You know, Vietnam occupied Cambodia, and these guys volunteered to go kill Vietnamese, and it was kind of a payback. Okay, this is a village of Barakat in Afghanistan. It was the first village, the first town that was abandoned by the Soviet-backed regime of Najibullah, right on the border of Pakistan. And I went in, and about 20 minutes after I got into the area of the town, it was bombed by jets that they sent over from Kabul. And inside that house that's burning him back is his son and 4 or 5 other people, the fighters that were killed inside that house. And he's looking up basically to see if the fighters would return. And this was in '88. And by the time I got this story and I tried to send it in to the Observer, to the other papers I wrote for, you know, the reaction was, this is an old story. You know, 10 fighters are killed by bombers in a small village in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, who cares? And they didn't even run the story. See this child? She's bathing in some fresh water provided by an NGO, German NGO. And in fact, you see the remains, no remains, it's gone. The town of Chalong. There were about 200,000 people killed in Aceh, mainly in Banda Aceh on the other side of the island. This is a village in West Bengal, about 2 hours drive from Calcutta. I went there with I met her, a lot of times I was able to get good information and help by going to the local reporters. I went to the Statesman, the newspaper in Calcutta, one of the newspapers. And one of the reporters, actually he was a sub-editor, he was an editor. He said, sure, I'll help you out, and he helped me out with translations for street interviews. And then he said, come to my village, my family village. And you look at that picture, and you know, there's nothing in that picture that could not have existed 1,000 years ago. It's just clay tiles on the roof, and twigs tied together for a railing, and mud on top of, you know, what do you call that, twigs, and homespun cotton. This is a Land Rover that's been beefed up. You know, they start with a regular standard issue vehicles, and then they build up the axles and build up the springs. And I think I once counted 30 people. When you consider that inside the vehicle there's going to be 10 or 15 people, and then there was about 15 or 20 on the top. This is in Kashmir. Okay, this is a madrasa. You all know about the madrasas. It's the Islamic schools that the Saudi Arabians built in Pakistan, and which are now the source of all this IS and all of this Islamic fundamentalism. A lot of it's coming out of the Pakistani madrasas. So I got into the madrasa, I interviewed the head of the madrasa, who, by the way, was very proud that, you know where he raises all his money? Here, the United States. He goes around to mosques claiming that he has a medical college. And in reality, these kids are all trained for jihad. So I talked to this kid here, the one who's sitting down. And I gathered, you know, all of his teachers gathered around. And I said to the kid, I said, well, what do you plan to do after you finish the school? He says, I'm going to do jihad. So where are you going to do that? He says, any place that's needed in the world. I said, for example, Chechnya, Philippines, Bosnia, you know, Iraq, Palestine. He knew them all. He was aware of all the places where there are Islamic fundamentalist movements. And I said, how will, and what will you might have to kill people. He says, I will kill the enemies of Islam. I said, how will you know when you go to these countries who is an enemy of Islam? He said, I will know because I will say to them, Salam alaikum. And they will not know the response, which is, alaikum salam. I said, well, if you come to my country and you meet my mother, she doesn't speak Arabic. If you say salam alaikum, she can't possibly say alaikum salam. Does that mean she's an enemy of Islam? You could have heard a pin drop. All his teachers were listening. And he says, no, she's not an enemy of Islam. I said, there's hope. There's hope in humanity. Common sense, at least the kid sees. This is Kashmir. Now, most people know Kashmir as terrorists and fighting and bombing, and India has 500,000 troops pinned down, and they come across the border. So how is this guy smiling? How is he so happy? Oh, he's got a cycle rickshaw, for God's sake. No more pedaling for him. I mean, just, you know, there's happiness and there's joy in these contested areas. And now, this is Afghanistan. I went with a medical team to a village, and these American doctors set up a clinic and treated about 800 people in the day. And because we had gone through Ghazni in a big convoy, so now basically all the bad guys knew where we were. We were on the dead-end road, you know. So there's no way you can get out without being targeted. So we said, screw the roads. We went between the houses into the desert and just went across the desert, you know, to get back to the base. Oh, this is the village where we were. And they had a lot of apple trees. And this guy was just channeling the water courses. You can't see it so well, but you can see it really well in this book right here. So, two kids, not only did the Army team treat people, but also treated thousands of 2,000 farm animals. A lot of the animals, many of them needed deworming and other medicines. So I just thought these kids were really cute. And here's she's not a nurse, but a nurse practitioner, and she was treating this Afghan girl. And of course, there's always a translator when the doctors are treating. And she told the girl, listen to, you know, try on the stethoscope so you can listen to my heart, you see. And she, of course, within 5 minutes, the girl was saying, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be a doctor. So, this is the height of idiocy. This is the Pakistani-Indian border at Wagah, which, by the way, just a week ago was blown up, and they killed, what, 50 people? So here you have Sikh families, because mainly on the other side of the border, it's mainly Sikh population. and they've come to look, and they're looking, if you, once again, if you see the book, you'll see it. It's horror, it's horror. They're looking in horror at the dreaded Pakistanis. And of course, both sides, they pick people who are giants, 6'4", 6'7", and they do this marching like that. And of course, they're both wearing the same uniforms, which are modeled on the British Army uniforms, because they were one country under Britain. So I've crossed this border several times at Wanda. It never fails to amaze me how you have a border that's over 1,000 miles long. You have 1.5 billion people, 500 million people on both sides together, and there's only one border. It's usually only open 1 day a week. And most people can't, you know, Pakistanis couldn't get a visa to go there, and Indians also. I don't have to surrender gold. Okay, here's more stupidity. This is Sri Lanka. And the dead bodies took cyanide. They're all the Tamil tigers are supposed to wear a cyanide capsule, and when they're caught, in order to prevent them from spilling, you know, being tortured by the Indians and the Sri Lankans, they're supposed to bite this. Well, they got like 15 of them, and all but three chickened out, didn't die. The other, I think 11 died. And I happened to be in the north, in the Jaffna area. I got a driver to take me up in there. We saw thousands of people there. I was the only reporter there. And they just completely, they were in like a hypnosis or something. I could walk anywhere I want, take their pictures, and but my driver stayed outside. He was shivering in fear. Okay, here's another story, and I got to tell you why it's a story. These trucks